pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads, and I have 3 new books to tell you about. But I don't have too much to say about the first 2, because I've just barely got a start on them. But the first one is a new release. I think its release date was March 20th, so very new. And I talked about it in my Books I'm Looking Forward to in 2018 video at the beginning of the year. Bury What We Cannot Take by Kirsten Chen. Kirsten Chen is an Asian American novelist. This is her second book. This is set on an island off the coast of mainland China in 1957 during the Maoist era. And as I said in that preview, the novel opens with 2 boys who belong to a family that was in the old regime, upper middle class, so are viewed with great suspicion by the communist regime. And the 2 boys, who are maybe 10 or 15 or something, discover their grandmother destroying a picture of Chairman Mao on the wall with a hammer, and one of them turns her in. So that's the opening premise of the novel. It's really well done. I'm really enjoying it. I'm a couple chapters in. The writing is good. It's got a kind of a humorous tone, which is interesting with such a serious storyline. I hope I'm going to continue to like it because it's starting out really good, and that is the best cover of 2018, I think. So I'll keep you posted on that. I'm doing this as a buddy read on Litsy. If anybody wants to hop on the buddy read, let me know. The second one, I'm kind of gotten into the habit of reading a book of poetry every month. So I started Sour Grapes by William Carlos Williams yesterday. I've only read the first handful of poems. It's one of his early collections from 1921. I don't know much about him. I know that I've liked the few famous poems of his that I've read over the years, but I couldn't name one of them. Is he the one that wrote about the red wheelbarrow? I think so. See, I don't think so, but I'm enjoying it so far. The first few poems are about March, so I happened to be reading it in March, so that's interesting, but I didn't find anything that I really wanted to quote to you today, but we'll see how that goes. And the last one, I have more to say. I hauled this last summer. With all the prize lists coming out, it's so easy for me to get lost in all of that, but I just can't spend a lot of money, so whatever I've been able to get access to on Scribd is what I've been focused on. Look at these books! Most of which I haven't read, so I did choose for the next book to start one that was on my pile, and this is The Towers of Trebizond by Rose Macaulay. This is a New York Review of Books edition, and this was published originally in 1956. And I've only read the first chapter, but I loved it! It's very whimsical. The foreword is written introduction by Jan Morris, and I've only read the first paragraph of the introduction as well, but she says the intellectual elite in its day could quote the first line. So I'm going to read the first paragraph is too long, but I'm going to read half of the first paragraph because it just sucked me right in, and I think it might suck some of you in too. Here we go. "Take my camel, dear," said my Aunt Dot as she climbed down from this animal on her return from High Mass. The camel, a white Arabian daler, single hump, from the famous herd of the Ruola tribe, had been a parting present, its saddlebags stuffed with low carat gold and flashy orient gems from a rich desert tycoon who owned a Levantine hotel near Palmyra. I always thought it to my aunt's credit that, in view of the camel's provenance, she had not named it Zenobia, Longinus, or Aurelian, as lesser women would have done. She had instead always called it in a distant voice, my camel, or the camel. I did not care for the camel, nor the camel for me, but as I was staying with Aunt Dot, I did what she bade me, and dragged the camel by its bridle to the shed, which it shared with my little Austin and, till lately, with my Aunt Morris. But this car had been stolen from her by some Anglican bishop from outside the Athenaeum Annex, while she was dining there one evening with Professor Gilbert Murray and Archbishop David Matthew. This sounds like it's going to be a trip and a half. The humor kind of reminds me, just based on the first chapter, it's kind of reminding me a little bit of Barbara Pym, who would have been a contemporary, and also reminding me, it's been a year and a bit since I read it, but the Map and Lucia novel by E.F. Benson. So yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy it. Now it goes right from there into the narrator, who seems like she's this hapless woman. I'm not even far enough into it to be 100% sure that the narrator is a woman, not a man. But whoever, let's say it's a woman, she gives a survey of the family background of her and Aunt Dot's family, particularly through the lens of British religious ecclesiastical history. It's really satirical and funny, and I found myself looking up various things like Laudian and the Modern Churchmen's Union, and there's a lot of terms like that, the eastward position, but then I just stopped because I realized it's all various schisms and breaks within the Anglican Church down through the centuries, and in a very sweeping, humorous way she talks about how her family fared through all that, and many of them being priests in the church. And there was a strong connection between the family and fishing, which was related in a very humorous way to their faith, and they got into trouble over the years because they had too much time to think while they were fishing. Sometimes that made their sermons great, but sometimes that led to them committing heresy because they had time to think and become latitudinarian or whatever. So really interesting. This is a novel about Aunt Dot, her niece or nephew, traveling with a bunch of Bohemian friends, many of whom are modeled on real-life members of the Bohemian set in England of the day, on a trip across Turkey. And apparently the late Billy Graham, they encounter one of his crusades in Turkey. Yeah, I don't know, we'll see. Look at that cover. That looks like my image of Aunt Dot already. So that is what's going on reading-wise. I've had a great reading week. I haven't been necessarily pleased with everything I've read, but I've certainly felt able to focus on reading, really sinking deep into several books. Whoa! I just remembered. I forgot. I have one more to tell you about. I didn't make a list because I don't can remember all that, but no, I actually have 4 books to tell you about. So bonus, here's a bonus. This one I'm doing on audio, and this was published this week. Very new anyway, and I first heard about it actually on Steve Donahue's channel. Ian Baruma's memoir, Tokyo Romance. And it's a memoir of his time in Tokyo in the 1970s. Ian Baruma is not somebody that I've ever read, but I've been reading book reviews of his books and collecting his books over the years. One of his books that I have kicking around here somewhere, I can't find it, but I have one of his books about a comparison of how Japan and Germany dealt with World War II in the ensuing decades, and how they dealt with war crimes and atrocities that were committed on behalf of their governments, committed by their governments. There it is, but now it's too far down on the... It's called The Wages of Guilt. I can see it in the stack, but it's near the bottom, and I don't want to topple the stack over to show you. He's a Dutch writer. He grew up in, as far as I understand, his mother's British and his father's Dutch, but he's got a very English accent. I think he must have grown up mostly in the UK. I don't know. But he's written a lot about Japan, and this is his memoir. So he was a young man, seemed to be sexually ambiguous at that time. He's married now to a Japanese historian, I found out on Wikipedia yesterday. But this is his memoir about coming as a film student and befriending a lot of the transplanted American and British Japanophiles that were here, as most notably Donald Ritchie. And I didn't know much about these people, and I'm finding it really interesting. As a memoir, I mean, I don't care about his personal life, but he's really talking a lot about Tokyo in the 1970s and the intellectual ferment and whatnot. That's really interesting for me. I don't think Japan has changed very much since the 1970s. A lot of what he's describing and observing about Japanese culture and Japanese people and Japanese daily life, I mean, obviously, it's more modern. Things have changed in certain ways, but in terms of the culture, it's like, yeah, that's still true. That's still true. So I'm enjoying it. It's well read on audio by the author, and I think that's all I have to say about that. I am sitting a little closer to the floor lamp over there because my overhead light, this is not a very interesting story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I have a ceiling mounted light that I put in when I moved in here 4.5 years ago. I bought the contents of an apartment in this same neighborhood, Sasazuka, from a young British couple that were moving back to the UK. And for $150, they sold me everything in their apartment. And I got movers to bring it 3 blocks to my apartment. And one of them was this thing. I guess I can probably do this without even turning it off. Can I? That's it. Okay? And it's an IKEA. It's an IKEA thing. And within about a year or 2, one of the bulbs burnt out, and I didn't do anything about it, didn't replace it or whatever. It just became a little darker in here, and then 6 months later, the second bulb burnt out, and then it was quite dark in here, and I was having trouble reading, so IKEA, and they didn't carry it anymore. So it's like, Jesus. Looked into buying a new light fixture to hook up into the ceiling, and that just seemed to be more trouble than it was worth, and it wasn't Kenji's strong suit to do it, and I don't know how to do anything like that. So I've made do for the last year or so with only one bulb, and it burnt out. So I have no overhead lighting in this room, but I have the 3 lights on the standing thing, but it's not quite as good, so I'm sitting a little closer to it so you can actually see me. Isn't that an interesting story? Anyway, the reason I'm not bothering to replace it is that I'm moving out, and that gives me a chance to give you a little bit of a life update. I had very excitedly and proudly told you all last fall that Kenji and I had secured this fantastic apartment in this really trendy area in Kichijoji that we were going to move into, I believe it was June 1st. It's a condo owned by one of my students, an elderly, she's not so elderly, she's maybe 70-something woman. It belonged to her aunt and uncle, and she completely gutted the inside, and it was going to be brand new and so beautiful, and 2-bedroom, and I would have a large room all for myself and my books and my booktube studio. Well, all that fell through about 2 months ago. Kind of had a bad feeling about it. It seemed kind of too good to be true, and there it's 5 o'clock, so there's the chime that I've talked about before. But very sadly, her husband got very sick, and so she's having to do a lot of stuff by herself that she's kind of had a bit of a nervous collapse. She was my student, and she's quit the class, and she's just kind of, everything's off. She can't. Basically, she wanted Kenji and I to wait until September. Well, we're getting married in August, and I have to be out of this apartment by the end of June, because they're demolishing this building and rebuilding and things, so there's just no way to extend it, and so we had to decline the whole thing. So it kind of put us back to square one and a bit of a panic, but one day we were drinking with my good friend who lives in this neighborhood and said, you know, we're kind of back to the drawing board. We'd like to stay in this area, Sasazuka, if we can. Do you know of if you ever hear of anybody renting an apartment or whatever, please let me know. And he said, what about mine? To make a long story short, he and his wife are moving out. They're going to live with his mom July 1st. His wife's having a baby next month. And then he's going on, it's not a sabbatical, but he's going to be teaching in Europe for a year and taking his young wife and very young baby with him. So he's going to turn the keys to his apartment over to us, and we're going to live there. And we can live there till the end of 2019. Definitely, and perhaps negotiate living there longer. But because we're going to just kind of take over his apartment and it's secret, the landlords won't know. It's a bit owned by a big real estate company that they would be this much of a chance that they would ever discover that we're doing this. We don't have any move-in costs. We don't have to pay any of the deposit and stuff. We just have to pay the rent to him and pay the utility bills to him, and it's going to save us a ton of money and taking all our stress away. Now, it's a 1-bedroom apartment, so it's going to be a little bit tighter, and for me filming and stuff, it's going to be more of a challenge, but it's beautiful, modern, and I think we're going to be it's be a great place for Kenji and I to start our married life. So has worked out maybe even better. And it's about a 20-minute walk from here, but it's still within this area and close to a lot of the places where I work, so I'm happy about that. But in the meantime, my room here has gotten darker and I'm not going to bother to do anything about it. Hopefully the weather will cooperate and I can resume outdoor filming soon. Alright, that is it. Thanks for watching.